Because I'm in the podcast booking agency niche, so basically it's using genuine connections and real conversations to drive sales. It's not about the traditional marketing or sales strategies, but it's more about building trust and relationship by appearing on podcasts. So sharing your story, sharing your knowledge, which builds credibility and trust with people. I think that's what it means to me.
Welcome to the Making Sales Social podcast, featuring the top voices in sales, marketing, and business. Join Bryn Tillman and me, Bob Woods, as we each bring you the best tips and strategies our guests are teaching their clients, so you can leverage them for your own virtual and social selling. Enjoy the show.
Welcome back to Making Sales Social. I have a special guest today, Noemi Beres, who is a dynamic co-owner of Podcast Connections, a premier podcast booking agency that empowers entrepreneurs and business owners to thrive through strategic connections and knowledge sharing. She has a passion for fostering meaningful relationships, and she specializes in linking her clients to top quality podcast platforms, enabling them to amplify their voices and expand their reach. With over a decade of experience in online marketing, Noemi brings a wealth of expertise to her role. Armed with a master's degree in Danish literature and language, she is a skilled linguist, content creator, and organizational whiz. Beyond her professional pursuits, Noemi indulges her creative side by crafting intricate hand-sewn collages on canvas and harmonizing with melodic tones of her hang and frame drum. A dedicated walker, she finds solace and inspiration in the great outdoors, fueling her passion for personal and professional growth. Noemi, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on today. It's an honor.
It's a pleasure. I'm really excited to dive into podcasting and the value of podcasting and all the things around that. But before we do, we ask all of our guests one question, which is, what does making sales social mean to you?
Because I'm in the podcast booking agency niche, so basically it's using genuine connections and real conversations to drive sales. It's not about the traditional marketing or sales strategies, but it's more about building trust and relationship by appearing on podcasts. So sharing your story, sharing your knowledge, which builds credibility and trust with people. I think that's what it means to me.
I love that. I think that's great. I think trust is a huge piece, right? And I think that's great.
Right.
So I'm going to hop into a few questions around podcasts. And first is, what steps can you take to effectively research a podcast before appearing as a guest? And how do you find the right show to guest on?
Yeah, I mean, everybody can do that, by themselves. I mean, you don't really need a podcast agent to do that. First of all, you have to find the right shows. And there are spaces where you can do that, like, for example, Apple Podcasts. It's a good place to start, or even YouTube. And first of all, you have to really know your niche and what your business is about. And once you know that, obviously, you can research with the right keywords for the suitable podcasts on Apple Podcasts or on YouTube. And, there are loads and loads of options out there. And once you have one podcast, obviously there will be so many other options popping up, down there on the site. And then you can go down on that rabbit hole because there's so many possibilities and millions of podcasts out there. You just have to find the one that is in your niche.
So you find the podcast, maybe you have a list of 15 or 20 podcasts.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, this would be great. How do you reach out to these people without being spammed?
Yeah, that's a good question without being spammy, because podcast hosts get a lot of emails and a lot of messages on LinkedIn and in different forums. So first, check it out. If the podcast has a submission form, a podcast guest submission form, but many of them, they do have it. So visit their website that belongs to the podcast. So check out the form. And if there's a form, fill it out with the relevant information about you, your business, your topics, your talking points, everything that is needed for the podcast. If they don't have a submission form, then you can start to search for their email addresses. Sometimes their email address is on LinkedIn. You can check it out under the contact information section. And or there's nothing out there. If there's no email, you can still reach out on LinkedIn. And my suggestion is to personalize your messages or your emails. Be unique, stand out, because there are so many messages out there. So you have to stand out of the crowd. And in order to do that, listen to a couple of episodes before you get on a show. That's really important. And then you can make a couple of relevant, sentences, expressions that I loved your show. And why did you like it? What was your favorite about the specific episode that you listened to? And I think that's a great conversation starter. Also, leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, and include that in your email when you reach out to someone, because obviously that's a good start when you tell someone that it's good for their ego and good for their podcast too.
That's great. Do you have any special tips on what to include in the email so that you're promoting yourself, but not like pitching too hard?
Absolutely. Yeah. Don't pitch too hard. That's a great advice. That's the first thing that you have to remember. Obviously, you need to include your bio, probably a shorter version. You don't have to start from, when you were born and up till now. It has to be short and sweet. Try to find the right length for that. So just short and sweet. And also include your suggested topics and talking points, a couple of them. We usually suggest pick 3 topics with a couple of talking points. That's important. Also include your website, your social links. It's a must. And then if you're a guest on podcast regularly, just include 1 or 2 interviews maybe. Or if you have a media page for your podcast, like a dedicated media page, include that too. So these are important when it comes to send out the email.
So I love that. We actually, each of us on our team has a page. We call it our media kit, but it's literally a page on the website, and it links to all of our listen notes episodes, so people can go through to that. So that's kind of fun. So I love that you're recommending that. So now I get booked, and they're like, yes, I love your topic. Let's get booked. What should you do to prepare for the podcast?
Never wing it. I mean, that's my first advice. Always prepare. Go through your topics, go through your talking points, and also get ready with a story, with anecdotes. They're really important to include them, during your interview, and just relax and, be present. Try to avoid any distraction around you, around the house, kids, dogs, neighbors, whatever, and just try to focus. I think that's really important.
So you've got your key talking points now, and you're like, okay, these are the things. I don't know exactly what questions they're going to ask me, but I know, kind of if it goes in this direction, I can talk about this. Maybe I have a couple of client stories, right, that I can tell that can lead back. How do you, become this very engaging guest, right? So more than just answering these questions, what can you do to make sure that you're engaging and people are like, they want to listen all the way through, not stop halfway and go, all right, I'm going to go to the next one. Because I do it all the time. As a listener of podcasts, I'm so excited by a topic, and then I listen to it and I'm like daydreaming halfway through, and I'm like, next. So what can we do to avoid that?
Speak always clearly. Be enthusiastic when you talk about something. Don't be stiff. Don't be too formal. I mean, just treat it as a conversation between 2 humans who just, maybe we're talking over a coffee or a tea or at a restaurant, and we're just having a conversation. So yeah, don't be stiff. Don't be formal. Try to be engaging and try to be, engage with the audience somehow, and don't treat it as a stage or something, because there's huge difference between if you're a keynote speaker and if you're a podcast guest. Because when you're a podcast guest, you are in your home office, or office, wherever you are. I think it's just more informal. So don't treat it as just like stiffness that's coming from sometimes as a keynote speaker. I think that's an important difference between the two, because this is like a friendlier conversation, I would say, between two people. Just relax and enjoy it. That's important too.
Yeah, I like that. And it really, I like the idea of it more of a conversation than a keynote. Yeah. And you learn more and you go deeper a little bit. Like, so, I heard something that you asked, I had a question, and then I had 2 or 3 more, right? That came out from your answer. So as a host, I like to keep it dynamic and not completely scripted. But I guess as a guest, that's important too. So I love that. So now you've been on this podcast, you've given a great interview. How do you leverage that podcast, number 1, to market that you were a guest? And number 2, to use it to become a guest on more podcasts?
I mean, I just start with your second question. So when you are a guest in a podcast and when you finish the interview, you can always ask the host for referrals. Can you recommend another podcast that might be a good fit for me? Or do you know someone that you can introduce me to? I mean, you just ask. I mean, they may say no, but unlikely. I mean, that's usually won't happen. So ask for referrals. And as for you have to promote the episode. And when you finish the interview, maybe next day, just send a thank you note, or just a thank you email to the host. I mean, that's a huge thing, because I always tell to my clients, and on podcasts too, that when you have a conversation, when you have an interview, it's just the start of a relationship. I mean, that's just the beginning. You can build up so many things out of that. I mean, you can be on each other's masterclasses, private Facebook groups. There are endless opportunities out there. You just have to use it very wisely. And also promote the episode, repurpose the content. Please do that, because it's win-win for the host, for the guest, and tag them on social media so you can reach each other's followers. So it's a broader audience for both of you. And you can use this evergreen content basically forever. I mean, I do that often. I mean, I'm doing interviews for a couple of years, and I use these interviews like 2 years ago, because there's, it's still evergreen and it's still authentic, and you can just use it again and again. And content is king, and content creation is king too. So yeah, there you go.
I love that. I do. So, as we come wrapping this up, I would love to ask you, what is the one question I didn't ask you that I should have?
Yeah, that's a good question too. And what makes a podcast guest a really good podcast guest who stand out? Maybe that's
okay. And what makes a really good podcast guest stand out?
I think being more open and vulnerable on a show, I think that's really, really important. Be authentic, be genuine, and people will love you for who you are and for your energy. And I think that's key. That's important.
I love that. So as some of our listeners are saying, I'd really love to be a guest on more podcasts. And although I got such great insights here, I might need a little more help. How can they reach out to you? How can they find you?
Sure. They can visit our website, which is podcastconnections.co, not com, but co. And they can always reach me on LinkedIn. If you type my name in, Noemi Beres, you will find me, and I'm happy to have a chat.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. This was great insights for our listeners. And speaking of our listeners, when you are out and about, don't forget to make your sales social. Bye.
Don't miss an episode. Visit socialsaleslink.com/podcast. Leave a review down below. Tell us what you think, what you learned, and what you want to hear from us next. Register for free resources at linkedinlibrary.com. You can also listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Play. Visit our website, socialsaleslink.com, for more information.